mo? Tiket negosyo mo. Oo. Nabali. Saan ani?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, we'll begin the meeting shortly. To our resource speaker, Dr. Jan Guira, and to my fellow students, good morning. It's a wonderful day, and I feel privileged to extend my warm welcome to all of you. My name is Agung Benta. You can call me Abe, and I will be your moderator for today, guest lecture about contemporary American literature. And before we start our virtual lecture, just a little housekeeping before we get started. Today's lecture is being recorded to be available for viewing post-meeting after this. And for the audience, yes, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box that will be provided all the time during the lecture, or you just list down your questions, because at the end of the presentation, we will have time for the question and answer session. Okay, and if you also have technical questions, please reach out directly to me via the chat. And to keep the quality of the sound functional during the meeting, please mute your account when you are not sharing, and please remember to unmute when you wish to share. Thank you. All right, for the information, the audiences today are faculties and researchers, lecturers, and students also. Most of the students here are taking the American Literature and Culture course, both in regular and international classes. Ibu Tri Murniati, welcome to the meeting. Ibu Tri Murni is one of the lecturer for American Literature and Culture in international class. All right, our guest lecturer today is Dr. Jan Guira. Good morning, Dr. Guira. Dr. Guira here is currently an associate professor of the MMSU College of Art and Sciences, where he teaches professional communication courses, English language studies, linguistic and literature, and culture courses. Dr. Guira holds Master of Arts in English language and literature and a Doctor of Philosophy in English language. His research interests are on language and society, English language training program, and language needs of professional, language and cultural studies, and literary analysis. Dr. Guira has also published books in art appreciation and English for tourism and hospitality industry, as well as researchers on language and culture and psycholinguistics. In 2005, Dr. Jan was a Fulbright Foreign Language Teaching Assistant, or most of us knows as FLTA, at Stanford University, California. And now, Dr. Guira is currently appointed as MMSU Director of Student Affairs and Service, President of the Philippine Association of Practitioners of Student Affairs and Services, Region 1, Philippines. And here it is, at 33, Dr. Jan is the youngest associate professor and member of the international rankings team of the university. Dr. Jan, I cannot wait to hear your insight of the topic today. And without further ado, we'll turn the time over to Dr. Jan Guira. Dr. Guira, please enlighten us.
Coming in clearly. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Dr. Guira. How are you today?
Good morning, everyone. How are you? How's the weather in Indonesia?
It's lovely. It's bright morning today.
Okay, let me just share my screen so that I can start the lecture. Actually, I'm not going to have a full lecture on what we're going to do today, but I'm going to have a literature class with the class, right? I guess that would sound better as a guest lecturer in the university than just having to talk about it. I encourage participation. I cannot really send tokens or anything, but I assure you that the experience will be very good this morning. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. Is my screen coming clearly? Good morning, everyone. This is our university. Mariano Marcos State University is rated 3 stars on the QS Stars ranking system. We are an ISO certified university. We rank as 101 to 200 in the world universities with real impact. And at the same time, we are ranked 401 to 600 in the world when it comes to the THE impact ranking. We are in rank number 2 in the Philippines for THE impact ranking. And just recently, we ranked 350 plus for the UI Green metrics, which would say a lot about. So I was tasked to prepare a lecture. Actually, I prepared a speech, not technically a lecture, but when our coordinator, Professor Dr. Janet Rivera here, told me that it would be very nice for us to have a class on American literature under my tutelage today. So I prepared not only a timeline on the contemporary American literature or the American literature itself, but I would want to feature one author that I started studying American literature. And I will also share one essay, which is my favorite theme for discussion. That would be Miss USA Ammonite, which was written by Miss Universe itself. And some things about me, I was in Indonesia last month. So I attended training in Jakarta. We visited the Universitas Indonesia. And I stayed in the Pondok India region. I don't know if that's South Jakarta. Abe, help me. Is it South Jakarta or? Okay. So I have 11 dogs. I love taking care of dogs. I have 4 cats. I love traveling. Little things about me. I love meeting new people, and it's very nice to meet you today, especially our friends from your university. I was in Indonesia for 7 days. So I visited this monument in Jakarta. Can anybody identify the name of this monument for a prize?
It's Mona's. Can I have the prize, Professor?
Okay. You'll get a prize for a free hotel stay in the. Am I still coming in? Okay. And this one is like the Lafayette part of the Pondok India Mall where we had our training for the QS in Jakarta last month. So for our lecture this morning, we'll focus on the American literature timeline. I'll be speaking for 15 minutes straight about the American literature timeline. Then we'll try to grasp some concepts of what the contemporary American literature is. We'll have to check on the. Okay, wait. My slides stopped sharing. Ooh. It's very nice. Can we ask 5 students to introduce themselves while I'm fixing my slide, Abby? Just for 5 minutes. Stop sharing.
Okay. Yeah, you are stop sharing. Here I got notification because your bandwidth is low. Yeah, your internet connection is unstable.
Yep, because you didn't have current this morning. I think something exploded in the line. let me work that out.
Okay, Professor. No worries.
Sorry.
Okay, while waiting for the professor, we got 50 participants.
Oh wow,
and
that's a lot.
half of them are, yeah, it's no, it's not quite a lot, Professor. I have almost 40 students in my American literature class,
Wow.
and they are really keen to have you today, because just last week, we're discussing about contemporary and postmodern literature. Yep.
It's not functioning. Can I restart? Try to connect with, for a while. I'll try to connect with my phone. Then I'll try to. This is
All right,
how the
Professor.
transition is in the new normal, and need to get used to it. Let me join in my phone while we wait for my computer to respond. It's the first time to do this.
Yeah, no worries, Professor. I also use two gadgets here because the audio in my laptop is broken. So yeah, this is what we have to deal
I'm trying
in
to
this new
connect
normal
with-
situations. We have to cope with this problem, like these online meetings.
Recording in progress.
I'll just leave with my computer. Then
No.
Abby, can you hear me? Can you have a 5 minute introduction? Like you choose your students who can join us in a discussion later on. Coming in clearly. Hello. Hello.
You're audible, Prof.
Ma'am J, am I online? Ma'am Janet? Abby, are you still there? Oh my God. Abby? Abby?
Yeah, Professor. Yep, I'm here.
Uh,
I'm sorry, I was kicked out by the meeting.
let me connect. Using my laptop so that I can share. Oh, sorry. So bad, my bad. Okay, there you go. Yay!
Recording in progress.
I guess I'm back.
Turn back into laptop.
Yes. Can I share screen now?
Yes.
So, as I was saying, we'll try to grasp in some concepts of the American contemporary literature. Then we'll also talk about some notable writers. I hope you haven't had discussed this in your class for American contemporary literature in the life of Louis Turker, our featured author for this morning, including the featured literary piece, which is an essay titled Miss USA Ammonite. Then we'll have a class discussion on the featured literary piece. So if we talk about America, it's technically a continent. While I was trying to figure out what to discuss, the lower portion of America is sometimes called the Latin America and the northern portion, which include the United States of America, Canada, and other places that are here with are places where we see some developments or some of the things that we do. So generally, American literature refers to written or literary works produced in the area of the United States and the colonial America. During its early history, America was a series of British colonies, as we all know, if we try to discover this one, on the eastern coast of the present day called United States. Therefore, its literary tradition begins as linked to the broader tradition of English literature. However, what we need to understand is that unique American characteristics and the breadth of its production usually now cause it to be considered as a separate path or tradition in the study of literature. Some of the earliest forms of American writing or literature were just pamphlets and writings extolling the benefits of the colonies to both a European and colonist perspective, or should I say audience. I remember reading Captain John Smith, considered as the first American author with his works, A True Relation of Virginia in 1608, and The General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles in 1624. Other writers this manner would include, I wasn't able to show them pictures, but I know your professor have already discussed this once you already had the timeline of literature discussed, American literature discussed in your class. So other writers of this manner would include Daniel Denton, Thomas Ashe, William Penn, George Percy, William Strachey, John Hammond, Daniel Cox, Gabriel Thomas, and I've written here John Lawson. The religious disputes during the earlier times of the United States prompted settlements in America were also topics of early writings that are there. One journal that I've read, written by John Rupp, discussed the religious foundation of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Another is Edward Winslow, who also recorded a diary of the first years after the Mayflower's arrival in the United States. Other religiously influenced writers in the history of American literature would include Increase Mather and William Bradford, authors of the journal published as The History of Plymouth Plantation in 1620 to 47. Other like, who else? I've included Roger Williams, Nathaniel Ward, or more firstly argued state and the separation of the religion and the government. Some poetry also existed. Anne Bradstreet, if you've read Anne Bradstreet, Edward Taylor are especially noted when it comes to poetry. Michael Wigglesworth, worth of the best-selling poem, you can raise your hand if you've read this, The Day of the Doom, that described the time of judgment. Nicholas Noyes, on the other hand, was also known for his doggerels verse that have existed in American literature. Interestingly, the Revolutionary period also contained political writings, including those by colonialist Samuel Adams, who else? Josiah Quincy, John Dickinson, and Joseph Galloway, a loyalist to the crown. Two key figures were, I know these people are popular to you, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Paine. Franklin's works, The Poor Richard's Almanac and the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which is really notable when it comes to American literature, are esteemed works with their wit and influence towards the formation of budding American identity. Paine's pamphlet, the so-called Common Sense and the American Crisis writings are seen as playing a very crucial role in influencing the political tone of that certain period. So as you see here, the 54 states of the United States that are embedded in their stars in my slide. I visited 15 states when I was in the United States and most of the time that I was traveling. But going back in the post-war period, the Federalist essay, have you watched? I staged Alexander Hamilton when I was teaching theater arts, when I was still a younger faculty member. Who else? James Madison, John Jay, who represented the historical discussion of government and organization, including Republican values, that is viewed as a very, how do I call it, a very golden piece of American literature. Another is Thomas Jefferson's United States Declaration of Independence and his influence on the Constitution. His autobiography, The Notes on the State of Virginia, and mass of his letters, like a number of his letters, have led to him being considered as one of the most talented early American writers. Fisher Ames, James Otis, who else? Patrick Henry are also valued with their political writings and orations that are also embedded in American literature. Going back to the timeline, the first American novel is sometimes considered to be William Hill Brown's The Power of Sympathy, which was written in 1789. Much of the earlier literature of the new nation struggled to find a uniquely American vote or voice. European forms and styles were often transferred to new locals, and critics in the American literature often saw them as inferior. For example, Wieland and other novels by Charles Brockden Brown in 1771 to 1810 are often seen as imitations of the Gothic novels that were written in England. In 1812, there was a war and an increasing desire to produce uniquely American work. A number of key new literary figures appeared in the limelight. Perhaps most prominently are Washington Irving, William Cullen Bryant, James Fenimore Cooper, and Edgar Allan Poe. Irving, often considered the first writer to develop a unique American style, although this is debated, different schools, different identities, wrote humorous works in Salmagundi and the well-known satire A History of New York by Diedrich Knickerbocker in 1809. Brian wrote early romantic and nature-inspired poetry, which evolved away from their European origins. In 1832, who's the author that's popular during this period? It's Edgar Allan Poe. He began writing short stories, including The Mask of the Red Death, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Murders in the Rogue Morgue, that explore previously hidden levels of human psychology and push the boundaries of fiction towards mystery and fantasy. Cooper's leather stocking tales about Natty Bumppo were popular both in the new country and abroad. Here's another author. In 1836, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who lived from 1803 to 1882, an ex-minister, published a startling nonfiction work called Nature, in which he claimed it was possible to dispense with organized religion and reach a lofty spiritual state by studying and responding to the natural world. His work influenced not writers who gathered around, forming a movement known the transcendentalism, but the public who heard him lecture. Another popular author for contemporary literature is Mark Twain, right? So the pen name of Samuel Langhorne Clemens, who lived from 1835 to 1910, is considered to be the first major American writer to be born away from the East Coast in the border of Missouri. Missouri is East Coast. So his original masterpieces were the memoir of the life of Mississippi and the novel, which is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I think I have a copy of this one in my book. Here, Twain's style, influenced by journalism, wedded to the vernacular, direct and unadorned, but also highly evocative and irreverently funny, changed the way Americans write their language. His characters speak like real people in his writing and sound distinctively American, using local dialects, newly invented words, and regional accents. Other writers in this period would include regional differences and the use of dialect would include George W. Cable, Thomas Nelson Page, Joel Chandler Harris, Marion Story, or Charles Edgeworth Craddock. And Henry Cutler and William Sidney Porter, O. Henry, as we all know. In researching the American literature timeline, we see two movements that are existing. Some of them would say that in several periods, like what we already know, okay, we're just trying to review here. What we already know is that two timelines would exist. Some discuss 1600s as the colonial period, the 1700s as the early US literature stage or the Enlightenment and Revolution period. In the 1800s is the unique American style, or what they usually call as the American Gothic period, which also include Romanticism and Transcendentalism. 1860s, we also have movements on literary realism, naturalism, and modernism. And just in 1950s, the post-World War to the turn of the 20th century, contemporary and postmodern literature existed. Other timelines would include the colonial period, which is here. I got this from the thought.com, which I followed so much when it comes to literature ideas. The Revolutionary Age. They also had this, the early national period, the American Renaissance, the realistic period, the naturalistic period, the modern period, the Beat generation, and the contemporary period. Going back, if we talk about Native American literature, they say that long before the arrival of Europeans in the Americas, Native people had already a very rich culture when it comes to what they are doing every day. Native American literary traditions would somehow comprise their oral traditions. What else? You know, once we talk about early literature, we always talk about oral traditions, folk tales, how people are created, other myths, and the survival traditions of the people who existed during this period. It's a very long shot. It's a very long thing compared to how America or the modern day America is right now. In some stories, there are significant culturally different approaches or cardinal directions. Repetitions, the cardinal directions plus the skyward, earthward, and to the center. And these stories were told and retold by generations of storytellers, by the many tribes that have existed in the country. The stories vary in the way they tell it, storyteller to storyteller, what else, tribe by tribe, and even across multiple generations, telling the same story and how the same narrator have explained this throughout time. Beginning in the late 1960s, the Native American Renaissance was seen, or let's start with 1607. In 1607, the colonial period that existed in American literature would somehow say that it encompasses the founding of one particular place of literature, and that is the Jamestown up to the decade before the Revolutionary War. Majority of the writings in this period are historical. What else? Religious. They also have written practical write-ups. And the authors that we should not miss during these periods are the likes of Phyllis Whitley, Cotton, Mather, William Bradford, Anne Bradstreet, and John Winthrop. So here, the first account of an enslaved African American, the title of which is A Narrative of the Uncommon Sufferings and Surprisingly Deliverance of Britton Hammond, a Negro man, was published during this period in 1760 in Boston, Massachusetts. Coming in with the Revolutionary Age, it was the beginning of a decade before the Revolutionary War. What we need to understand in this period is that it ended 25 years later. So the Revolutionary Age focused on the writings of Thomas Jefferson, Pine, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, where the US is in constant struggle to build their own identity, the political stance that they have. And this is arguably the richest period of political writing science and since classical antiquity. Important works during this period, as I mentioned earlier in my beginning speech, is the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Paper, and the poetry of Joel Barlow and Philip Freneau. In the early national period, this is the era where American literature is responsible for the notable first work of American comedy written on stage. So The Contrast by Royal Tyler, written in 1787. The first American novel, The Power of Sympathy by William Hill in 1789. Washington Irving's works, Copper, Brown, are credited also to creating a distinctly American kind of literature. And at the same time, the works of William Cullen Bryant, and markedly different English traditions. Going near the American Renaissance, or what they also call as the Romantic period in America, or the age of transcendentalism, commonly is being accepted as the greatest of all American literature. Major writers include Whitman, Emerson, Thoreau, Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, are credited with the shaping literature in this period. It is also in this period where
Ci, Ro,
the poetry of Henry Wadsworth,
ya Allah.
the short stories of
Gila.
I guess someone's microphone is open. Sorry, my speaker is very loud in the office, so I get disrupted. This period also gave rise to the American literary criticism led by Poe, Lowell, and Sims. By the year 1853 and 1859, the first novels written by African American authors like Clotel, or Male and Female Clotel by Brown, and Our Nig by Wilson were also produced. In the realistic period, as a result of the American Civil War, Reconstruction, and the age of industrialism, American ideas were also created for self-awareness. And this literature, like what was presented earlier, certain romantic notions of the American Renaissance were replaced by what? You bet, it's the realistic description of American life, such as those represented in the works of William Dean Howells, Mark Twain, Henry James, and other regional writers such as Kate Chopin, Bret Harte, Freeman, Cable. In addition to this are Whitman and other master poets like Emily Dickinson appeared during this realistic period. During the nationalistic period, Jenny? Oh, sorry about that. During this, I'm in the realistic period, we talk about certain romantic notions of the American Renaissance were replaced by realistic identities or realistic descriptions of what American life is, such as those represented in the works of Howells, Mark Twain, and the others like Emily Dickinson, as I mentioned earlier. When we entered the nationalistic period in the 1900s, about 14 years that it existed, it's where Norris, Dreiser's, London created some of the most powerfully raw novels in American literary history. Their characters are victims who fell prey on their own base instincts and to economic and sociological factors. Warton wrote some of her most beloved classics, such as The Customs of the Country and Ethan Frome in 1911. The House of Mirth in 1905 were also written in this period. The modern day period marks where the second most influential and artistically rich age of American writing. So in here, we can see E. E. Cummings, T.S. Eliot, and many other writers like Stein, Lewis, Wolfe, Anderson. The modern period contains within certain major movements, including the Jazz Age, Harlem Renaissance, and the Lost Generations that they had. Many of the writers were influenced during those times by World War I and the dissolution that followed, especially ex parties of the lost generation. Furthermore, the Great Depression and the New Deal resulted in America's greatest social issue writing, such as the novels of Faulkner and Steinbeck, and the drama of Eugene O'Neill. Before we go on, let me finish the Beat Generation, where Kerouac and Ginsberg were devoted to anti-traditional literature. That's why it's called Beat Generation. In poetry and prose, the anti-establishment politics that included Burroughs and Miller, who are two of the significant writers, word censorship. And these two greats, along with other writers at this time, also inspired the counterculture movements of the next 2 decades. Now, it's starting 1939 up to this present. We have seen contemporary periods of American literature. So I have here photos of what depicts American contemporary period when it comes to literature. During this time, after World War II, American literature has become broad and varied in terms of theme, mode, and purpose. Currently, there's still a debate or a little consensus as how to go about classifying the last 80 years in this period, including where we are now. And more time must pass, perhaps, before the scholars of literature would finally deem what contemporary period is in American literature is. That being said, there are a number of important writers since 1939 whose works may already be considered as classic. However, we still study them up to this period. The post-war period also saw the rise of a whole spectrum of innovative and subversive themes in literature. As I mentioned earlier, it's like countercultural works of the 1950s Beat Generation to John Updike's reflective exploration of faith, personal turmoil, and sensuality. Sexually frank content, okay? Also, there's a restriction of writers were free or the featured literary piece that we will discuss later. And writers were empowered to speak about taboos, about social. So, has seen an exploration of modernism themes, such as unreliable internal monologues and temporal distortion of reality. Contemporary writers have used literature to critique American culture, finds connection across time and place, and explores themes such as, America is pluralism, America is a melting, America world would converge because of its superpower, because it's a country wherein we call it the land of milk and honey. And themes like relativism, how you become relative, of course, the age of self-consciousness. So, American literature is about far more than just entertainment. We need to know that. It's both a reflection and influence upon the movement that we have discussed in it. And during the contemporary period, a very influential movement could also be anchored with the kind of generation that the people who writes during this period could be learned. And that is what makes the American contemporary period very diverse and very human. Why? It communicates and creates the idea of being, like the writings of Kurt Vonnegut, Amy Tan, Updike, Welty, James Baldwin, Platt, Miller, Morrison, Ellison, Didion, um, Bishop Williams, and Philip Roth. However, there's a lot more. You might also have studied Maya Angelou in some of your in some of your lectures with your professor. We have Barth, Mailer, LB. And one of my favorites, and not so talked about author in American literature, when we East Asians or would study it, is my featured author for today. So my featured author, Luz Turkel, talks about many reflections about death, rebirth, our hunger for faith. One of the last books that he published, titled Further Thoughts from a Lifetime of Listening, was released in 2008 because he died in 2008 at the age of 96. Going back, who is Louis Turkel? Louis Turkel was born in May 16 of 1912 and died later in later days of 2008. Was born in Bronx, New York City, in New York. He is noted as one of the contemporary writers of American literature. He has a law degree at the University of Chicago. He's also called Studs, STUDS, and married to Ida Goldberg since 1938, whom he stayed with the rest of his life. They had a son named Dan. His last oral history book was The Will, The Circle, The Unbroken, his reflection of death, rebirth, and hunger for faith. Louis Turkel, as I mentioned earlier, was born in New York, earned his law degree from the University of Chicago. He gave up practicing law in exchange of a career in broadcasting and writing. Our featured author this morning experienced also the Great Depression, as they call in the United States. He changed his name to Studs after one of the James T. Farwell's novels character, Studs Lonigan. So in 1952, he began working on the WFMT and had his own show called Studs Turkel's Almanac and Studs Turkel's Show, where he played mostly music. It was with the award-winning The Studs Turkel program that he began interviewing people from all walks of life, and it gave birth to an excellent compendium of oral history books and literature in the United States. His first book, The Giants of Jazz, was published in 1956. See, the book is published in 1956, and that is included in the contemporary or postmodern literature period of the United States. And more oral history books followed it. In 1980, he published American Dreams, Lost and Found, which began with the Miss USA Ammonite, which we will be discussing today, in his bid to persuade an extraordinary range of Americans to visualize their version of the American dream. He later received a Pulitzer Prize for general nonfiction in 1985. So our topic for this morning, probably during our last parts, will be the discussion of this featured literary piece. It's an essay. It's called Miss Ammonite USA. Technically, it talks about, the essay talks about the journey of Miss Ammonite toward becoming Miss USA. In summary, or in a nutshell, the essay talks about reminiscing the time that Miss Ammonite became the Miss USA, starting from her childhood when she went to the University of Colorado, while also being a model or a commercial actress. Then she became Miss Illinois Universe up to she reached Miss USA at the same time as a runner-up of Miss Universe. We're going to be talking about how Miss Emma Knight portrayed beauty in the ideal beauty queen programs. You know, once we talk about USA, we talk about beauty pageants for females and we talk about football for males. They're really into gender. They're really into identifying how people's lives are changed individually. And at the same time, there's a comparison between competitions like physical competitions and at the same time, intellectual and political views, which is brought about by a very rich history of political items that have happened in their history. So from here, we'll also try to have a discussion on what the difference between terminologies used in the piece and how does Emma Knight reconcile her experience of Miss USA and the preceding years as a growing woman. Lastly, we will talk about how to approach this kind of literature when it comes to viewing essays into the use of literary criticisms. But for this time, I will give you 15 minutes. Can I stop, Abe? I'll stop sharing screen for a while so that we'll have time to read the piece. I'll place the I'll share let me share the link. Okay. I placed in the chat box the link of the complete essay. May I request let's have a 15-minute. Would that be okay, Abe?
Yep,
Or
that will be fine, Professor.
15-minute will be too long. We'll have like
5
10 to
minutes?
12 minutes. You do that in 5 minutes. Let's have 10 to. It's kind of long essay. Let's try to read the piece individually. Then I'll ask students to answer questions that I prepared for us to analyze how this essay falls under the American contemporary period and the ideas that come with it. So, and we will try to portray how the relativism, pluralism in the United States would come out, including self-consciousness in the literary piece that we will be reading this morning. So I have here a set of questions in my notes for us to understand clearly the literary piece. For this time, let's have a 15-minute reading time for this. I understand we have 3 hours, right? I lost 30 minutes. So we'll have we'll just have like 15-minute reading time and we'll have 30-minute discussion time. Then I'll open the floor for open forum.
That will do, Professor. That will do.
That will do. So we'll still have some more time. To discuss some of the salient features of contemporary American literature. Okay, so now your 15-minute reading time starts. Okay. Can you see my screen? I shared 15-minute countdown time. Timer starts now.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. So,
Time is up.
okay, time's up. I'll be very considerate. I'll give you an additional 3 minutes to wrap up. Okay, your 3 minutes starts now. Wrap it up, kids. Last 1 minute. There you go. Hello. Are we okay? Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Professor. Loud and clear.
Okay, very nice. So going back to my earlier discussion on the contemporary American literature, we talked about how American literature in the contemporary period has seen an explosion of postmodernism themes. So here in the piece, Emma Knight, Miss Illinois, Miss USA, and Miss Universe runner-up is talking about her experiences as a beauty queen and how she can we say disliked what she was doing compared to who she is before she joined the competition. So We can talk about sexuality. We can talk about how intellectual turmoil is happening in the piece. We can talk about how mainstreaming of the idea of beauty is in the postmodern or contemporary American literature is, and how the themes of relativism and self-consciousness has surfaced in the piece. Let me pose this first question to our students. One of the quotes that I love about Emma Knight, when she said being a beauty queen is just like the T and ace, the T's and the ace. Before I discuss the first theme that I have had here, may I ask, can we do I pinned myself. Let's start with anybody from the class who would want to go first. Am I gonna choose or you're gonna choose, Abe? Can I have Risma Emiliani Putri to answer my first question? Hi, Risma.
Yes, sir.
Hi, can you show yourself?
I'm sorry, but I'm not your schemer, so I'm so sorry I cannot show myself. Cannot turn on the camera, sir.
So, who's this? Or I'll ask Muhammad Abi. Is Muhammad Abi in class? There you
Hello?
go.
Hello?
Hello.
Excuse.
Yes.
Risma
Risma?
Emiliani.
Is she a student?
Yes.
Oh. She's
Hello?
not here anymore. Risma?
Risma
Yes.
Emiliani is a student, 5th semester student.
Can you show yourself?
Waiting for. I'm so sorry I cannot show myself, sir, because I'm not your schemer.
Okay. Can I have someone who can show his or herself for our discussion? What about Muhammad Abi? Or Desidina Alfina? Hello?
Hello,
Yeah.
everyone.
Are
For
they
those who are still
undergraduate?
online, could you please on cam? Turn on the camera.
Abe, are they undergraduate students?
Yep.
Okay.
They are
So we
students,
shall
most of them.
here.
Aurora Magenta.
Aurora.
How are you,
Hi,
Aurora?
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Okay, Aurora. Thank you for coming up. So the first one is, it was mentioned in the piece that being a beauty queen, okay, at the beginning of the piece, she was narrating that, you know, being a beauty queen is just the T's and the A's, right?
Yep.
So this goes with how we define what's beautiful in terms of being someone who's in a beauty patch. Can you tell me, in the kind of society wherein we are living right now, compared to the United States, who or what is beautiful in the society?
Hello, am I audible to everyone?
Yes, we can hear you well.
All right. So as what I have read from the sources or the excerpt you sent to the class today, I can capture that the value of beauty back then in the early American beauty pageant was like all about the physical, the sorry, quote unquote, the tits and the the A word, three word, yeah.
Okay.
It's all symbolize the physical. They don't really care about the intellectual and everything. So it's all just the physical. That's pretty much about it.
Right. So if you want to answer, you can just raise your hand. Follow-up question. In the piece, how do they define who is someone or the someone or this someone that has this beauty? What is beautiful in the piece aside from the physical criteria? So it's about their physical appearance. What else? Did they talk about Did they talk about personality as a characteristic of someone who is beautiful, or did they talk about anything about intellect that would dictate the person's beauty? Or let me just ask you this question. Or can we have another one? Thank you. Sorry, the names are not showing on my screen. Thank you, Aurora. Can I ask Satrio Bima Resto?
Mas Satrio Bima Restu, could you turn on the camera and microphone?
Anybody else from the class? Trigger question. So, how does Emanite fit your idea?
It's not there at the moment.
Anybody who can answer me with this question? How does the idea of Emanite? So we love to watch Miss Universe. That's given. Anybody who can say, what is your idea of a beauty queen?
Nasha Fitria Dive, could
Do
you
you have
answer
a
the
beauty-
question?
Do we have a beauty queen in class, Abe?
Beauty queen? Oh, I don't think so, Professor, but we have drama queens, many drama queens.
Interesting. So, how does Emanite fit your idea of beauty queen? Like, aside from the T's and the A's, beauty queens serve as ambassadors of goodwill. They join in many other things. Their views about politics is very important. The representation of people is also very ideal when it comes to giving, or when it comes to their stand as someone who has been crowned with a certain idea of being that beauty queen. So going back to the experiences of Emma, it's very interesting to note in this piece of literature the way she changed herself from being that little girl, as stated in the first paragraph, that she didn't feel comfortable watching the she used to sit around her television watching Miss USA. And by the time she was 8 and 9, a young person at that, she didn't feel comfortable watching the idea that it was exciting, it was thoughtful, we thought glamorous. Joining beauty pageant should be fun, right? Because it's an experience. But here, we try to compare and contrast how beauty competitions would somehow dictate our idea of joining physical characteristic traits competitions compared to how intellectual competitions would go in, like in politics, political debates, political ideologies, and at the same time, how femininity, which is in the view of feminists, if you've read a certain passage on its part, it talks about the MS, the use of MS and the use of Miss, which is very particular in the views of the feminists. And they say that, oh, there she is, your ideal of what a Miss America is. So what is that ideal trait that we can see every time that there is your ideal Miss United States of America? Right? So she would also quote in the piece that she resent most is that they expect her to live the version of an American dream for her. But what she just really wants is to have her own self. When she had her 1.5 day of vacation, she tried to come up with the idea that, oh, this is rest and this is what I want to live my life as. So you see, in the idea of being beautiful here, the con is on. It's a fantasy. It's only the American dream. People would tend to be self-conscious about themselves, would tend to be beautiful in manners that they themselves can dictate. However, it is one of the sovereign interests. Though, you see, if you have a crush on a guy, what is your ideal beautiful when it comes to a guy? If you have a crush on a girl, what is your ideal of someone who's handsome, someone who's good looking? Here, the norm is that comparing to other places, the norm is that beauty queens are just beauty queens. They lack this intellectual property. But in the sense of Emma Knight here, there's a part in the essay that would point out, in her narrations, that would point out that she was to sign a contract. While she was reading the contract, the organizers would say, I do not read that anymore. And she would respond, oh, I never sign anything that I don't read. So the beauty in understanding this right now is that gone are the norms that beauty queens are just for beauty. It is also an intellectual competition. They would also say about her being a ghostwriter, having a ghostwriter, and she would say, hell no, I know how to talk. Because their idea or perception of what a beauty queen is will always stand that it's all about the A's and the T's. So in a more intellectual discussion about this, it also evolved through time. That the beauty queens right now needs to have an focus. They need to focus on things for people to be more self-conscious. They need to focus on clearing gender stereotyping. That females are just beautiful because they have nice vital statistics. They have nice body figures. They have blonde hairs. Right? We could say that in a further understanding of what's happening in this context, beauty would always be in the eye of the beholder. If someone says you're beautiful to me, you will not be beautiful to others. But that's how it evolved through time. Beauty is relative, and beauty most likely would show how your journey as a person coming from Emma Knight's point of view, being someone who hated competitions at an early age and being able to be chosen as one of the titleists in the Miss USA competition. We could tell that she has forgone the idea that beauty queens are just for the T's and A's, but beauty, right? and beauty queens should have the ability to show intellectual capacity, understand, and the promotion of the things that they want to advocate as beauty title holders. So it gives me the idea about how am I still on? I think I'm not moving on the screen. Okay, that's better.
You're still on,
Here's-
Professor.
We're still on. Okay,
Yes,
so
proceed. You're still on.
supposedly, what I want to show you on a bigger picture is that do beauty pageants like this. We do beauty pageants. There's so many beauty pageants that we have. We have Miss Intercontinental. We have Miss Universe. Do you conduct beauty pageants in your school, Abby?
Yes, Professor.
See, the thing is, do these beauty pageant competitions have a role in our modern society? What happens after the pageant? That's what Emanite is pointing out. And as an American, with the idea of being independent, with the idea of being or going away with gender stereotyping, you would always say that they need to play a bigger role in our society. And you see, the beauty of this piece is that it goes away with the idea that beauty pageants should only focus on the T's and the A's. But we can have a more sociological perspective on this when we talk about literature. Right? The idea of beauty in the society, our norms that beauty queens are dumb, our norms is that beauty queens are only for those who are beautiful, who are physically or who has physical aesthetics. Then I'd go back to my trigger question. Who dictates beauty in the society? So technically, this is a very interesting, or should I say intriguing, when it comes to studying the contemporary American literature, because we find relativism, how we relate to things that are happening around us. We find self-consciousness. Am I beautiful in my own perspective? And I'm beautiful in my own standards? Then here comes beauty. And who, going back to my question again, dictates what is beautiful or who is beautiful in our society? I could say that I am beautiful in my own rights. You could say that you're beautiful in your own rights. So the femininity, going back to the piece, again, it talks about your femininity. Like Emanite, when you were young, you have your own problems. You have your own thought, right? You have the idea that when I grow up, I want to be like this. But the question would be, what you would want to be, is it beautiful? Some would say that it's good to be up there, but the view is not beautiful. Think about that. How do you paddle yourself? How do you include beauty when it comes to intellectual ideas? See? So the experiences of Emanite as a totality of what we see in the modern American literature would somehow start with her crisis with herself, being a girl who's very competitive in a younger age, being pressured by the society to be like this. After, then you go to a university, find a job. And that's the beauty of life in general. And at the same time, it gives us the idea that we do not only advertise what we see as beautiful, but we see gender roles in perspectives. We see a feministic view. You know, if I discuss feminism to you, it would take me another 4 to 5 hours to give my views on feminism. It's just that That's one thing on how we should understand contemporary American literature. Aside from they are very self-conscious, being the world's most powerful country, the people in the parts of the United States of America would always have this independence, the idea that they are self-conscious, that they know what's happening around them, and the idea of stereotyping cannot exist in their society. We can also say that are they teacher education students? Yes. I can hear you.
Mostly English literature student. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think there is English education.
So the point is, the speaker in the piece might be a bit cynical about life, but her personal strength and vivacity clearly marks her as a winner. In most cases, if I teach literature classes, I would often create in them certain images before we talk about the piece. Like in that piece, I would usually let my students define who is a beauty queen, who is someone who is beautiful in their perspective. So if ever I ask you, do you know someone who's a beauty queen? Then students would often say, yes. And the next question would be, what image comes out from your mind if we say a beauty queen? And then the discussion would go on. That's how we need to view contemporary American literature. I would always say that, well proportioned, not only viewing the literature as it is, but ignite your reader response. Research about the activities that we do. And I would say to my students, I would say to them that, what do you think are the criteria for choosing the beauty? These are for reading comprehension only. So after you do that, you try to have other explicit features on literature. Dig in. Ask them about their feminist overview. Ask them how society dictates the things that are happening around us. You can also ask the students about their view on the essay using our literary lenses, in a sociological point of view, in a feministic point of view, but never forget the beauty of diversity, as what contemporary American would always say, that people has the right, it's their First Amendment or their freedom of speech. People has the right to respond, has the right to give their own free speech about certain things. And in the view of Emanite, these are the pleasant manners. These are the things that she needs to forgo in order for her to be the Miss American and Miss Universe runner-up. So we can also always remember that whenever you're teaching or you will be teaching and letting students understand what contemporary American literature is, the question would always be its idea, how it relates to the society when this literary feature is written. That's why I focused much on identifying who wrote who and who wrote what in the different periods. I've been telling things or authors on certain periods so that you can understand the things that are there. And post-structuralism or postmodern literature, probably, or the contemporary American literature themes are so varied that even scholars in American literature is still finding the right movement that would fit on it, because it's a reflection or it's a view of what kind of society the American society is in this modern generation. It's contemporary. You can move from one place to another. You see Latinos here, you see Latinos there, you see Black Americans here, you see white Americans here. There are still communities that do not accept Black Americans to stay in their community. There's still communities in the United States that has a large number of Filipino Americans, a large number of Indonesians, a large number, because it's a melting pot. It focuses on who they are as a people, and it focuses on their real life experiences towards self-consciousness. And with that, put in mind that the question will always be a comparison and a contrast between how the society has dictated the post-modern literature in the United States, or the what we call right now as contemporary American literature. They talk taboos, they talk about turmoils, they talk about who they are, because that's one of their characteristics. It's on their First Amendment. They embrace freedom of speech, they embrace power. And with that, it makes their culture great for us who study it. Thank you very much. And I'm now ready to entertain some of your questions, if you have some.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Guira. Okay, that was really insightful lesson for me. As personally, it's really, really insightful for me. And I hope you all enjoy this amazing presentation. I already have two questions, Professor. One is from Afza. I put it on the chat. The question is, when the Chicago paper guy asked her Miss or Miss, and the guy said a beauty queen and feminist, he asked, what makes her a feminist just by saying Miss or Miss? What's the difference? Does the title Miss or Miss shows her a feminist or what?
Whenever you study okay, I guess that's more of a language question than a literature question. Miss MS is a general term whenever you're using it in the English language. So MS is, okay, MS period is uncertainty. You can be a married female, or you can be a single female. While you're addressing young girls or women under 30 that are unmarried, the MISS is used. So, the feminist movement was used to have an equal right. You see, in the history of the feminist movement, women had this movement in order for them to have equal rights with. And even in that movement, they want to have the separation of those that are married and with those that are unmarried women over 30. So the point here is that when you use MISS, you are addressing young girls. You're addressing women under 30, and these women are unmarried. When you're not sure of the marital status of a woman, if the woman is unmarried and over 30, if she prepared address with the marital status, the thing is you use MS. So in the Philippines, we have this context of if the person is married. So once you use MS and MISS, meaning that person is unmarried. And that is also a part of the feminist movement. Actually, I have that question also in my list of expected questions for this discussion, because it's a part of a clearer discussion in understanding why the title is MS and not MISS. There is a degree of uncertainty because in the piece, Ammonite would usually say that She's 22. People are expected to be married by 22, but here she is, the oldest beauty queen. And she was telling in the piece that it's not nice to be old whenever you're in a beauty pageant like that. So you see the idea of how feministic view would linger in this kind, or even in just the piece MS and MISS.
Okay, thank you, Professor. That really answers the questions. Yeah. And the second one, I quote from my message here in my WhatsApp message. I quote here, so far I know, the contemporary and postmodern literature characteristic is one of them is very realistic characters and also strong characters. And what makes it different and what sparks or ignite this character? Is it only just what you said because of the amendment of freedom of speech? What happened before, prior to this period?
So ideally, the American literature periods would dictate what's happening around them. So here, as I said, after the post-war period, right? After the post-war period, there was a rise of the full spectrum of innovative and subversive themes in the US. So if you go back, before the contemporary period of the US, they had this literary realism, naturalism, and modernism. So that was the transition period. After the Civil War, American literature has faced skepticism, right? Understandable because, you know, American literature is also part of the historical context would dictate us that in the late 1800s and 1900s, it was like the likes of Mark Twain were already writing realism. Steinbeck and other writers also had this attempt to point the present realistic happenings in the US. Migration came in after the war, there was a movement of people. So with the post-war period in the US, they were already presenting innovative and subversive themes cross-culturally. Because it's no longer that the British invasion. There's no longer British invasion over them. It's the whites, the blacks, the African Americans, the Latinos, Asian nationalities, European nationalities. United States has become a melting pot. And with that, the rights of these people are respected. And with the view of this one, strong people can go there. You know, talking about my own experiences, why you say that, while you said that strong characters, when I went there, you know, in the Philippines, I teach English. When I went there, English is their native tongue, right? But a lot of people there cannot talk how Americans talk. My language and culture professor would often say that we do not have an American accent. What we have is the broadcaster's accent, how the broadcasters would portray it. Because they are the first people to come up with media. They are the first people to come up with independence when in terms of how they view it. They fight for liberal rights. They fight for, you know, the focus right now is anti-terrorism, you know, and everything like that. Off the record. However, this made them portray themselves as strong characters because as the leading country in the world in the postmodern era, or in the postmodern era, in the contemporary American literature, it goes with their identity. It goes with their relativism, their self-consciousness, not only on their ability to do freedom of speech, it also goes with who they are as the superpower in the world. That's how they portray themselves, not only in things that we see, but also on the things that we do not see, like diplomatic relations, like people who would fight for terrorists, people who would get out from being slaves from their own countries. That's the strong point. That's the literature that we're studying right now in contemporary American literature. How pluralism in the society is, how self-relativism is there, and how self-consciousness, how they are aware of what's happening in their society. That makes it very beautiful to study in literature because in the first place, that's how they portray themselves. And literature crystallizes it. Literature makes them relevant and it's written. It's written in their history. These people fought for their rights to be equal in the society. Did I answer it? Come on. Help
Yes,
me.
Professor. Thank you so much. Is there any other question?
I read here in the chat box, like I have a question. With the purpose of a beauty contest to achieve many benefits, how can? Okay, I am not privy on beauty competitions in Indonesia. I'm more privy of Thailand because they are our competitors in the international arena. It's Thailand, Turkey, what else? Because we have a lot of Miss Universes in the Philippines. We conduct in our locality, there are pageants stage for young people, there are stage for big people, for slim people. But what we say right now in the society is whenever there's a beauty pageant, it's always beauty with a cause. So using the idea of what is beautiful, what is beautiful and what is relevant in the society. So let me give an example in our own university. So yearly we conduct this Mr. and Miss University competition in our university. For the past years, we only do it as a way of staging a program to select who will represent our university in higher kinds of beauty pageants, in higher levels. But today, our beauty titleists in the university needs to have an advocacy. They need to have a campaign. Is it to reduce poverty? And we are focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So our beauty queens right now use their influence, use their voice, use their stand as beauty queen to develop programs, initiatives, and activities that would deal into solving problems that relate to these sustainable development goals. As an example, one of our beauty queens is, I guess that's SDG, SDG well-being, number 3, number 4 is quality education, number 1 is zero hunger, and no poverty. I guess number 1 is no poverty and zero hunger for number 2. Those are their main focus. One is focused on zero hunger. So they outsource a lot of things using their influence as beauty queens in order for them to come up with initiatives like this. They give free stops for free food. They help our students in their dormitories who are less fortunate in life in order for us to be well off together and achieve no poverty in our society. We have also health and well-being, which focuses on mental health. These can be some of the advocacies that can be achieved by beauty contests. Because, you know, after getting the title, you already have this idea of talking to people. You have the idea of reaching out to a bigger society. And this is just one example. And there are many other benefits that we could have when we do beauty competitions like this.
All right, Professor, another one. Last question from Diva Indra. I have a question. What do you think regarding present-day American literature?
That's an interesting question. My own perception is that, sorry, I'm US school. I went to the US. And as a young child, I loved reading O. Henry. I loved reading Edgar Allan Poe's piece, The Bells. It's the seasons of time. At present, the present day literatures that we have, or I would use literatures because, as I've said earlier, they embrace pluralism. America as a melting pot or as a place of destination in the world for those who are migrating. The present day American literature is at its finest at the moment. It's really developing into the so-called self-consciousness era. That's why I cannot really term a single word for it. I can write an essay about what I think regarding the present day American literature. But for me, it's a very great piece, or it's a very great idea. It's okay. Let me think of another thing. Should I say it's more of a collective idea of what the world is, and that is American literature, right? Because they are not only focused on them as Americans, but also the varieties of Americans that are there. I would say varieties, which would include Latin Americans, which would include, or Latino Americans, which would Filipino Americans, Indo Americans, and the many other kinds that is existing in the modern world or the postmodern literature in the United States right now. Did I make it? Did I make that right? I'm waiting for the question of Abe.
Okay. Does anyone have any question left? Okay, no question in my chat. And
I had this in mind, like on American literature. The beauty of American literature right now is that they're the ones questioning their own culture. And as people who have reached the point of enlightenment, it's where, it's where change come in. It's where new ideas will be brought out. It's where innovativeness will come in when it comes to ideas and bettering things. That's made the American literature or the present day American literature beautiful. Because they focus on questioning their identity. They focus on questioning their counter cultural work is already present in their system, which makes it great, which makes them the Americans great, and which makes us great also as people who study this kind of literature in these ages right now. Sounds about right. Okay.
Okay.
I have time.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor, for answering the questions and for the great presentation. It was a pleasure for me to have you with us. All right, we are reaching the end of the presentation. And if I can wrap up, so the contemporary literature is that literary era which was created after the end of the World War II. So from 1945 to the current day, so I think it can be difficult to define a literature period that is still occurring until right now. And it's hard to define because it is so fast, so really fast. And it includes everything written after World War until the present day. And it includes literary works written in all genre styles and with many different intentions. And writers over the last 70 years have done a great deal of experimentation. They often utilize strong, memorable characters like the Miss USA, Emma Knight. Yeah, it's really an example of the work of literature in contemporary periods. And it also reflects the current political, social, and broader personal issues of the time. And it also challenged the reader to reconsider their contemporary world. And I think the easiest way to do is to look at the various movements the period has considered of so far. Okay, we are in the end of the presentation of the meeting. So this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending the webinar. We hope all of you have learned and enjoyed this presentation.
And
Thank you so much,
full
Professor.
opportunity for them to open their cameras.
All right, everyone. Can you please open your camera and
So that I can see our students from Indonesia. I hope you can visit the Philippines also.
okay.
What?
Mas Fatin, boleh dibantu? Okay.
1, 2, 3, smile. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor, for the insight.
Thank you. It was an honor being with you today.
It was an honor for us to have you, and I hope in the next future, in other opportunity, you will have more lessons for us.
Thanks too. I hope I can invite you to in my class.
Inshallah, Professor. Okay. Thank you so much and have a good day, everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.